Welcome to another episode of Savor Food and Body. And today is going to be a real treat because it's a topic that we haven't talked about all that much, but definitely deserves some airtime. We're going to be talking a little bit about some racial justice and embodiment. And of course, all of this stuff kind of wraps itself into body image. And it's a lot of, I don't want to say behind the scenes when it comes to messages that we're given about our bodies, especially as our bodies age, how we show up in the world, might feel behind the scenes, but it's very much front and center in terms of how we show up in our relationship with food and our body. So my guest today is Mimosa Collins. She is also a fellow anti-diet dietitian. And Mimosa, thank you so much for being here today. And I wonder if you'd like to share about yourself, introduce yourself to our audience and the work that you do in the world.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amanda. I just want to start by saying it's such a treat to be a featured guest. I remember when I met you and beginning of my practice, everything was baby. And so now being interviewed by you is like such an honor for me. So thank you for having me. And hello, everyone. My name is Mimosa Collins. I have a private practice called Rejoyn Wholeness, and I started that in 2018. And I have had the honor of supporting individuals and family heal their relationship with their food and body for, gosh, almost a decade now. In various settings, I've been working with people in kitchens, in farms, in sexual empowerment workshops, one-on-one clinical settings. It's been quite an honor to work with people in such a variety of settings. And yeah, right now I focus mostly on the one-on-one virtual telehealth world.
I think that's one of the things that people probably don't really understand about us dietitians, because I think most people think, oh, okay, dietitian, cool, you work for a hospital or you work for an outpatient clinic that's tied to a hospital. And in reality, like dietetics can go a lot of different directions because it is just about food. And we often forget how food is so integral in all different parts of our lives, from who grew the food, to who cooked the food, to who sold the food, to why you chose to buy that food and take it home and put it on your plate. And really, as dietitians, we have our hands on any one or all of those steps in terms of the food conversation. So that's one of the things that I loved one of the first times that I met you. I'm like, oh, she's done so many cool things, and she's come at food from so many unique and intricate ways, and that just,
Mm,
I'm sure, just enriches your clients' lives for sure. So let's dive
mm,
into I want to hear more about this new practice that you
mm.
started. And like you said, your practice is called Rejoyn Wholeness. And what does that mean to you? And why has that been the choice name of your business?
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And for those who aren't seeing it visually, rejoin is spelled Rejoyn instead of the traditional spelling. At the time, I thought it was really clever. But now I realize I have to spell it out every time I give someone my email address. So user error. But anyway, um, the short story of what does rejoin wholeness mean to me is it's a practice of daring to feel joy in spaces and situations when we've been taught to feel shame. And that's one reason why I was willing to spell rejoin in that particular way, because that felt like a really integral part for me. Um, and I also chose wholeness specifically over something like wellness, which is what a lot of people kind of autocorrect the name to be. Um, but I chose wholeness for a couple of professional and personal reasons. Some of the professional reasons were from the work that I did with people and the different desires that they had within themselves. There was a part of them that wanted to do something, but another part that said they should do something else. And so there were these conflicting elements inside of themselves, and like they felt fragmented and at war with those parts. So the wholeness piece is integrating everything and saying that all parts are welcome, even the shoulds that are afraid of what we want, and the wants that we're told we should feel ashamed of. Like everything is whole and welcome and integrated. Um, and then the personal reason why I felt wholeness was important is because of how that conversation, that fragmented piece showed up in my identity as a mixed race person. Many times when I come into a space, people, they kind of try to register who you are or what you are, and they'll say, "What are you?" to me oftentimes. And I'm like, well, number one, I'm a human, which is helpful for me to remember because of, it's easy to forget our own humanity sometimes. But I also found myself trying to figure out, like, I'm 16% this and 25% that. And one day I met someone who is also mixed race, and they had a patch that said 100% mixed race, period. And I just felt this like settling and like this exhale in my body, like, oh, I can be all of it. I don't have to figure out what percentage I am of a certain heritage and then only allow that much space in my life or myself to be, that express that part of me. I can just be all of who I am. And so that's another personal reason why Rejoyn Wholeness was the choice for my business name.
No, I love anytime that there's a story behind the name, because I think it's so important. Those of us that are working in the undiet, non-diet space, we're still kind of the unicorns out there, especially when it comes to nutrition counseling. But there's a fair number of us, and you and I are both in the Pacific Northwest, and we have a lot of amazing colleagues around in our communities. And so having a unique story that goes directly with your business name, your practice name, and that really the way you practice and why you practice the way you practice is really centered in that work. Mine's the same with Alpine Nutrition, story for another day. But I love that you have so much depth behind why you chose to practice this. And as you were describing it, it really started to think even more about our women in midlife listeners, because I think we come into our 40s often, and it's like we get hit over the head with a 2x4 of like, I'm done playing everybody's rules and games and living up to their definition of this and this and this. I'm 100% me. And that wholeness, like you said, of being able to just witness, I'm a whole person. I got my good stuff, I got my bad stuff, I got my trauma, I got my what I'm excited for, I got this body that's like shape-shifting into a new season of life, and I am this whole person. And I also love that rejoin too, and the way that you spell it. And I also love that you're going to have to tell everybody how you spell rejoin, because you're going to get to tell this story over and over again every time you give your email address, which I think is really brilliant, because in doing so, you're going to be helping people connect with, am I getting enough joy in my life? Do I have joy in my life, period? And this is essential for women in midlife. I mean, it's essential for all humans, but what I find a lot in my clients and the women I work with is, again, you get to that late 30s, early 40s, and they're kind of like, is this it? Really? I've been maybe doing the same thing, like taking care of everybody else for the last 20 some years of my life. Is this it? And so that joy piece can often be missing. So I love that. I love the name of your practice and what it's centered on. And your work centers quite a bit on embodiment. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit more too. And you really encourage people to connect with their bodies through embodiment. And so I'm curious how you describe embodiment to your clients or colleagues that you're meeting, or as you're just describing your work. What does embodiment mean to you?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that reflection also. Yeah, and embodiment in the short end of it is the way I describe it or think about it is bringing awareness of your body from the inside out rather than the outside in. And I came upon that understanding of it through my own experience of my own embodiment. And that was through working with a sexual empowerment coach for 3 years, actually, in various settings, and realizing that I was always centering other people's experience of my body as opposed to what am I experiencing in my body? um, so yeah, that's kind of how I come to know um, embodiment from the inside out as opposed to the outside in, and being with that question of whose experience is being centered.
And I think that's so important for, I mean, any gender, however people identify, but historically for so long from people that identify as women too, we've been objectified in so many shapes, forms, languages, comments
Mm,
for so
mhm,
many years. And
mhm,
so, if even in the media, we're constantly seeing, and I shared this in the live that I did this morning, got a little bit on my soapbox, so sorry, friends, but I've been following different media publications for a project that I'm working on, and in the newsletters, the email newsletters that I get into my email box, like it's just reading their headlines, and it's about so and so celebrity who's in their late 40s, early 50s, and how great their see-through dress looked like on them, or what their toned
mhm,
butt looks like, or their legs. And I'm
mhm,
like, I'm sorry, can we not focus on the accomplishment that these women have done in their career? The fact that they've made it through Hollywood into
mhm,
their late 40s and 50s. Why is the headline about what they looked through in a see-through dress? Why did the woman feel like she had to show up on the red carpet wearing a see-through dress? Who is
mm,
that for?
mm,
So I'm starting to get a little
mhm,
feisty with the more that I read these headlines. And, it's not my thing, but I want to be
mm,
aware of, but these are the messages that are still out there about women's
mhm,
bodies. And
mhm,
they're, to your point, they are what keep us from trying to do an outside job of
mhm,
an issue that is an inside job.
mm, mhm,
Embodiment, intuitive eating, healing your relationship with food in your body, it's all an inside job. But when we're
mhm,
constantly bombarded with these outside messages that we should
mhm,
focus on our outside appearance, that
mhm.
makes that inside work super, super hard.
Totally. Yeah. And the embodiment piece, it's funny. w- I appreciate that the question was how do you talk about it with clients or your colleagues? Because when I work with clients, we actually don't talk about it much. We practice it, because if you're talking about embodiment, I mean, you're still in your mind with it, and so like usually when I'm working with people, it's more practicing embodiment together. And I also just want to name that it's so understandable that embodiment is hard to practice and that it's not our default setting. It's not what we were taught to do. If anything, we've been taught to disconnect from our bodies because in the moments when we are in our body and we speak what the truth is that comes from that place, we're shut down. And so I just have so much empathy and compassion for the parts of us that we had to develop in order to survive and put other people's experience of our bodies in the center. Because sometimes our safety depended on someone else's perception of what we were to them. So I just want to offer that compassion if anyone is hearing this and, falling down a shame spiral of, oh, I should do the I just want to send so much love for that.
No, it's such a good point too. And I mean, even I think for women that are going through a lot of body changes in midlife, weight changes, weight gain, or weight distribution changes, and their bodies are just changing, hair, skin, nails, the whole gamut. It's all
Yeah.
remodeling in a way. And so when that feels so foreign, it makes total sense why then we glam on to the articles. I mean, the magazines wouldn't write
Mhm.
those stories if people weren't reading them. So
Mhm.
I'm so glad that you highlighted that, because there's absolutely no shame in someone wanting to read those articles, because they're trying
Mhm.
to make sense of, okay, how do I show up in a body in midlife?
Mhm.
And, oh,
Mhm.
okay, so and so's doing it this way, maybe I should do it that way too. And it doesn't matter, even if you're listening, you're not in the midlife space. I mean, we do this in our 20s, we do this in our 30s, like, oh, that's what we're supposed to do to get the partner, to start the family with the
Yeah.
2.5 kids and the job and the house, and
Oh,
that's what we're supposed to. Okay, great. Well, we all do that, right? Out of a place
yeah.
of safety and wanting to fit in and make sense of our own lived experience. And I think
Mhm.
you also really hit on something that's super important for people to understand, because embodiment can kind of feel maybe a little philosophical or something. But
Mm.
if you find yourself thinking too much, I should be doing this for my health, I should be
Mm.
doing this for my skin, my hair, my nails, my butt, my whatever, that is you thinking in your head
Mhm.
instead of asking below the neck, like, hey, body, what do you need? Like, what are you feeling for food today? Do we want to
Mm.
move today? Do we need some more
Mhm.
downtime today? How can I nourish you today? And so
Mhm.
just to have people, to reiterate what you said, have people understand, if you find yourself, I'm thinking about what I should be doing for my
Mhm.
health or what I should be doing for my life right now. That's in the example of the head up, instead of what does your
Mhm.
gut say? Not in gut health way. That's a whole different conversation. But
Uh-huh.
like, what does your intuition say? What does your body say? What do
Mhm.
you want to do with your life? I'm curious if you're familiar with the work of Neva Peron. Is that
I'm not.
okay? When we pop off, I will give you
Okay.
the link to her book. But
Yeah.
for anyone listening, Neva Peron is the foremost researcher on embodiment. So she spent
Hmm.
her 40 plus years, whenever, as a researcher. I believe she's out of Canada, Toronto area, and she
Mm.
studied the embodiment of women and girls
Mm.
through
Mm.
questionnaires, through interviews. And there's the really great book. I will drop a link to it in the show notes because I'm going to butcher the title, but it's something about on the path to embodiment. And the
Mm.
cover illustration says it all. It's a corset. And it
Yes.
goes into like how things like corsets kept us from being
Ah.
embodied in
Mhm.
our experience. So if folks are
Yeah.
interested, I will say her book is really well written. It is a dense read. It is not a light, like relax before you go to
Mm.
bed read, but it's
Mhm.
got some really cool stuff in it. So I will share
Mhm.
that with you after we pop off. And then I will drop the link in the show notes for our listeners. So
Awesome.
give us some tips, some strategies, and like how you work with people in your
Mm.
practice, just from a basic level anyway,
Mhm.
to help them become more embodied
Mm.
and then
Mhm.
have a healthier relationship with food in their body, especially as bodies are changing in midlife.
Yeah, totally. Um, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm so honored that you're asking me this question because I feel like it's such a exploration, an ongoing exploration, of learning how do we practice this more. And there's so many layers in that practice. And so often I'm learning alongside my clients about how do they access this space in themselves. But to answer your question as best I can, the ways that I do support people in cultivating an embodiment is using similar words that you used earlier around bringing awareness below the neck. And sometimes I have specific embodiment practices that we'll do together. Like I have an exercise called the 2-minute tingle that I learned from one of my coaches, excuse me, that I have on my Instagram page where I demonstrate what that looks like. I might do a guided meditation, or, what's also really effective that anyone can do on their own is after they've told a story or after they've shared something that happened that week, I'll ask, is there anything happening in or around your body right now? And just kind of invite the body's experience into the storytelling. And just having that curiosity and raising that question allows the space for the body to give some feedback. And at first, when I ask someone that, the answer is, I don't know, which is totally fine. And I always say we get better at what we practice. We always get better at what we practice. And so if we practice bringing non-judgmental presence and awareness below our necks, we'll get better at being able to hear what comes back. And it's really interesting and quite an honor to be with people in that practice, because when we invite our attention below our necks and into our bodies, Tara Brach says attention is the most basic form of love. So I'm witnessing people attempting to love themselves when they do that. And then we really get to learn what compels them to come back to the mind. And through that attempt, through that trying and reaching for loving the body and attention, we get to find out what's scary about that and what makes us run away or why we feel like we shouldn't do that. And so the way that I support in that is just bringing a lot of curiosity. It's so easy, right? We just do these things and it happens.
Right. We just take our 5 deep breaths and we're automatically connected.
Right. But I guess one thing I do want to name, though, that's important too, and maybe a part of the cognitive piece that we run into, if I can, or did you want to say something? Okay.
No, go for it. Yeah.
Is oftentimes, this thing about wholeness and all parts are welcome, and we don't need to kick any parts of ourselves out of the picture. I think it's really important or worth taking the time to consider, how did we learn to respond to pain in this way? Or how did we learn that we are disposable, or parts of us are disposable? And this is a theory that I have. So if someone's out there and wants to come talk to me about it, I welcome that. But I do a lot of abolition work with a lot of the abolitionist leaders here in Seattle, and I can't help but think about how our current in the punitive justice system, our form of justice is isolating someone who has committed a crime, an effort to change that behavior, and this belief that punishment results in change. And I know Brene Brown talks about how important compassion is for changing behavior and growth. Um, and so thinking about that, I'm really starting to turn toward models like restorative justice as a new framework for ourselves to think about how we navigate our own internal systems and how we react or respond to our the unfairness that we may have experienced inside of ourselves. Like many times people feel betrayed by their bodies because their bodies did something without their permission, right? Which happens all the time. And so it's like in a restorative justice system, how do we respond to that sense of betrayal? If kicking the body out and punishing it in effort to make it change, if that's not the system we're replicating, and we're instead trying this new model of how do we understand what the intention of the body was and keep it integrated into our system, that's like, if we can do that, whoo,
We're golden.
we're golden. That is the practice. That is the practice.
Well, and what you're talking about too, to kind of connect some dots here for folks, is really,
Mm,
I mean, what you're talking about is dieting. Like,
yeah.
dieting
Hmm.
is a form of that punishment. And it
Hmm.
is that form of lack of acceptance of the what is of your body.
Hmm.
And also recognizing many people get into dieting because they felt shame about their body not being okay based on cultural societal ideals. So
Hmm.
whether that's body size, body shape, age, race, I mean, it all ends up getting tied into that too. And so I love that you're
Hmm.
bringing that framework in too, to because it does help people understand. Well, if I think this way about punishing people for a crime they commit, and I understand that that doesn't help that person necessarily heal. Well, how is dieting and punishing your body for being the size that it is by not feeding it enough
Hmm.
or overstressing it with
Hmm.
too long of to-do lists? How is that
Hmm.
any different? I mean, and some people might say, okay, guys, that is a large parallel. And fair, maybe rightfully so.
Hmm.
But if we break it down into those really like oversimplified terms, I
Hmm.
mean, punishing is punishing, shaming is shaming. If we're doing that in the criminal justice perspective, if we're doing that in the racial justice perspective, if we're
Hmm.
doing that with bodies and aging
Hmm.
and body size and health and all of that, is it
Hmm.
really that different when we boil it down to it? Yes, they're
Hmm.
very different scenarios, but is the judging, the shame, the blame, the assumptions, is that those parts of behavior, human behavior, is that really that
Hmm.
different no matter what we're talking
Hmm.
about? I don't know.
Hmm.
Something for people to noodle on.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you yes anded me there because it is a little bit radical even in our spaces and to talk about that. And um yeah, I think there was something I wanted to say um about hopefully you can edit this, Amanda, because there's
Yeah,
something I wanted to say
you're good.
about um Uh, what was it? Maybe it's escaped me now. Mm.
More on the social justice piece.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you kept saying, you mentioned that we're humans, like resting is human, like our bodies are human. And I named kind of earlier in the conversation, like I need to remember that I'm a human being. And, this piece around not honoring our own humanity, I think this is one area where all of us have suffered from racism, and the history of our country and what our country was founded on was the dehumanization of people, both people that were in the US and also the people abducted from other continents to be brought to the US. um this has been practiced on a subconscious level in effort to tolerate that sort of mistreatment. We had to collectively dehumanize each other. And so I really see this reclamation of our collective humanity as so much bigger than just our individual work. It's like the liberation of me depends on the liberation of you, or vice versa. I think I said that wrong, but it's so true. And it's all connected and part of the collective effort.
Absolutely. If people are interested of learning more about this part of the conversation in particular, Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings is a really impactful book. I don't care what shape or color you are, it hits some points from the historical narrative that you were just talking about too. And my first degree is in history, but I read that book and went, well, I want my money back. I want my money back from my bachelor's of history, because all this got left out of the art history class I took, of the North American history class I took. And so that, that paired with Neva Perron's book of, I think it's called Journey of Embodiment, like those two resources, if folks are interested more about this connection. Anyway, it's like body image, like way deep body image stuff. Like embodiment is body image. So if folks are wanting to explore more about where they are in their journey of their body image, like dig into some of this stuff that Mimosa and I have been talking about. And Mimosa, where can people learn more about your work and maybe some additional resources that you have available for folks?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is a great place to start, and it is Rejoyn Wholeness, REJOYN wholeness.com. And once you get there, you can sign up for my newsletter that I send monthly. And my newsletter always includes a organization that I'm promoting to donate to that is addressing some of these systemic inequalities. Every month is a different organization. I also include a link to a playlist that I curate every month. Dance is an important part of my embodiment practice and reconnecting with myself, and I love sharing that with others. So I do that through this playlist, and I'd love for you to listen with me. I also include a blog post, and I think this month's might be about this piece around justice and how that can be echoed, our broader systems, how those can be echoed in our thoughts about our bodies. And then the fourth thing that I include is a podcast. So maybe I'll include this one.
There you go. That's awesome. That sounds like some really great resources for people to dig into too. And it's nice that it just comes once a month. So it's something to look forward to. And then it sounds pretty robust. So people have a month to dig into all the resources that you're offering. So we'll put links to all of that in the show notes so people can find you. So thank you so much for being here, Mimosa. It's been fun to reconnect, and thanks for your time sharing your experience on the show.
Oh my gosh. Yes, Amanda, it's been such a pleasure. I was so nervous, but you made it so easy, and it's just such a joy to talk about these really deep, hard, meaningful things that I'm passionate about. So thanks for letting this be a safe space for that.